Welcome to the Rebuild Procurement podcast, where we dive deep into topics to keep procurement people up to date and ahead of their peers. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are right now. On today's episode, we're going to do an end of 2024 review. So a look back by Alan and myself. I'm Tom Finn, bringing 15 years on the client side procurement, finance, and category management experience in large and small cap orgs.
And I'm Alan Veek, a procurement geek on the sell side of the street. I've assembled a team of superhuman procurement professionals doing managed services at a company that we call Summit. All right, Tom, I'll set this one up. Basically, these are, I would call these predictions we didn't make in 2024 because the show was born in 2024. A true review, yes. So this is kind of fun. We get the ability here at the end of the year to look back and say, I'm sure that I would have made these predictions because I'm smart like that. But this will give us a chance to kind of say, maybe not so much predictions, whether they came true or not, but more, hey, these were some of the outstanding things in specific categories that happened in 2024, things that we liked best or things that we pick as a winner or a loser. So I'll introduce each one of them, and then Tom, I'll let you go first, and I'm happy to go second. So category number one, prediction number one is the biggest procurement winner. This is a procurement show, so we got to kick it off with the biggest procurement winner. Take it away, Tom.
So my biggest procurement winner, I have Zip on this one from the intake side of things. So I went a little software on this one, software procurement specific, just because those guys, I think they got funding. I'm not sure. I think they're valued at $1 billion or $2 billion right now. What is Zip? They're essentially they've labeled themselves as the intake for companies. So where procurement can begin. A lot of companies might start with an SAP or Coupa, but Zip is more, it's just a place where you can start and then it connects to some different systems in the org. So they've just, from a funding standpoint, they've clearly been killing it with that. Obviously in the background, that means they're getting clients because folks wouldn't give them money unless they were doing a good job, especially within the procurement space, I'd expect. So yeah, so I think they've really done a good job establishing themselves and then making procurement folks interested and somehow getting them money to spend too.
Yeah, I like that. I'm a little jealous of your pick. You had that's out of the gates.
Don't
Tom,
worry. Don't worry. They tail off.
That is that is super strong. Yeah, we have one of the teams inside of Summit that works on the client uses Zip, and boy, that team is just gaga about it. And you mentioned it seems like procurement people love it. I would say probably even more so stakeholders love it. It's a good, easy entry into procurement, which is not an easy thing to pull off. So yeah, that's a good one. I chose for mine. So you went kind of on the software provider side of procurement. I went on the corporate side. NVIDIA. You think about the massive growth that NVIDIA has seen in the last couple of years, but specifically in the last year, they really took off hockey stick like. And as the large language models have started to really become CPU hungry, the GPU hungry, these NVIDIA chips are all the rage. And to build a supply chain like that is not easy with that sort of growth. So on the backside, I've been following some people in my network that have moved over and taken positions inside the procurement team at NVIDIA. Specifically, one woman who I worked with for about 20 years. Actually, I've known her since she was like 15 years old. We started working together, it seems like when she was fresh out of college. And Lynn Rideout is a category manager at NVIDIA. And I could just tell you this, if NVIDIA is hiring the likes of Lynn as category managers, they're building a juggernaut of a procurement organization. So I thought NVIDIA was the biggest procurement winner of 2024. All right. Second category, of course, if there's a winner, there's got to be the other side of the coin. There's got to be a loser. Tom, how about the biggest procurement loser of 2024?
So for me, I had this as ESG. Not in that I don't like the idea of it, because I always have. But I think some hands, probably more from a corporate standpoint, like a greed standpoint, were at play. And I really think it took a step back this year. I think if you were to think back to 2023, there was a lot of push behind things, like EcoVadis and those other companies, like super well known accreditations. But I just feel like within 2024, and probably some of this has to do with the way that the U.S. political way went. I think that ESG probably, from the procurement standpoint, took a huge hit in 2024.
Yeah, I agree. It's another strong one from your point. And in keeping, you're kind of like with software and with concepts. I'm with companies. So my biggest procurement loser in 2024 is a pretty easy one. It does a little bit of tag teaming with last week's discussion about consolidation in the Department of Defense spending down to the big five. One of the big five, Boeing, in 2024. Boy, did they take a brutal beating, using the killer bees as the alliteration. Boeing's brutal beating, the titanium bolts, the doors flying off of airplanes. And just this week, I saw that there was an announcement of even further layoffs happening at Boeing. So I give them the title of biggest procurement loser of 2024.
Good stuff. No, I mean, you know my thoughts about Boeing. Those guys came from sitting on top of a pedestal. In all seriousness, they were like the king of planes, the king of space, the king of everything. And I mean, they've failed at space, and I mean, like tragically failed on planes versus like Airbus, which is an alternative. So yeah, they've been going through tough times.
Tough times. All right, third category. We're going to do another winner and a loser. This time it's just the biggest business winner. So we're not going to limit ourselves to just procurement. We're going to think more broadly about business. The biggest business winner. Tom?
So for this one, I actually had NVIDIA. We didn't talk about this ahead of time. But the reason I had NVIDIA for this one, and we could pick a bunch of alternatives, but whenever anyone talks, just from a 2024 standpoint, anytime anyone talks with AI, the next, like from a business standpoint, the next question is like, who's making money? And then everyone like laughs, smiles, throws their head back, says, just NVIDIA, right? Those guys are the ones that just like reaping all of the benefits, all of like nearly like 90% of the profit benefits from AI. So they build the chips that essentially are the ones that are capable of running a lot of these large language models that the OpenAIs and the Anthropics and the Geminis have to end up using. I could see that changing in the next year to 2 years, but for 2024 in particular, that was my pick for biggest business winner.
Well, obviously I like that because they were a winner on my list too. Yeah. I'm going to go just slightly downstream of NVIDIA for my pick, and that's OpenAI. They continued to lead the field in innovation in large language models. And I think that obviously they figured out a way to finesse from being a not-for-profit into a full for-profit. They've weaseled their way into so many of the other large language models. They're kind of the engine that powers the large language models, especially the ones behind the biggest software implementation in the world, Microsoft. So I think that they're clearly the biggest business winner in my book and continue to drive innovation in this field. Hopefully, that'll be a fun one we'll look forward to on our next show to figure out, do they play somewhere in our predictions for 2025? A good one. Okay,
Yeah, but just on that, I saw the other day even, I think, is it Mensa? Is that the ones like the high IQ? Like they're now like Mensa. So from their standpoint, they're like from the IQ, I think it was like 133 based on how they're able to rank themselves. So pretty wild stuff.
Pretty wild stuff. We're in a good innovation field with AI these days. And I think it'll continue into 2025. All right, the other side of the coin, Tom, the biggest business loser of 2024.
No, this isn't the whole company, although they took a big hit. But I had Google's Gemini. So on the other side, from a 2023 or 2024 standpoint, I mean, those guys took the biggest hit. We'll see what happens. I mean, right now, I'm already considering this next year. It sounds like maybe some things are improving for them. But when it goes to this year, those guys are caught so off guard that Sergey Brin, one of their founders, like came back to work full time. So that's how behind the eight ball they were. And I mean, these were the guys that led with DeepMind. Everything that OpenAI does is based upon papers written by Google. So whereas some of these other companies, like we talk about a lot, Alan, they don't innovate. Like Google's obsessed with innovation and
Yes.
in a good way, also sharing, but they were caught so far behind others that really just took their lunch in 2024. So I'd say Google Gemini.
Yeah, that's good. And you might not need to just limit it to the Gemini side, because they're going through some pretty significant antitrust lawsuits
Oh,
that,
yeah.
whether of their own making or not, that's big headwind for them. And their bread and butter business, the ad business, they're seeing that kind of be consumed by the AI large language model push. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're facing some huge headwinds, and certainly in a couple of senses, they're probably one of the biggest business losers in 2024. I'm going to go with an old friend of mine, McKinsey and Company.
Mm.
Don't know if you saw the latest news, but it's certainly been brewing over the course of the last year. They had an over $600 million settlement with the U.S. government for basically, I wouldn't say single-handedly, but being one of the main levers behind the opioid crisis that's hit our country, killing hundreds of thousands of people every year. And they were one of the early advisors in Purdue Pharma to basically say, hey, you've got this killer product, literally. People can't keep their hands off of it. Let's push it in a big way. And they had a record settlement based upon some I would call it evil advice that they provided to one of their clients.
Yeah.
So McKinsey, my biggest loser for 2024.
Yeah. Right now, I'm actually reading the book When McKinsey Comes to Town. So I've worked at specifically one company that went through a giant restructuring with McKinsey. It was the standard multi-million-dollar award, help us restructure our business. And it's a very simple playbook that within manufacturing companies can hurt them a lot too. Doesn't sound like the success rate is enormous on manufacturing. It always depends on, right? Measure what matters, John Doerr. Um,
Yep.
Based upon whatever KPI you're looking at, it can look good, but long term, maybe not. So it's interesting their approach and understanding a little more about the culture internally, where it sounds like the culture itself is quite nice, but then sometimes what you do with it, not so nice. And
Yep.
nice is also relative too, right?
Yeah.
The ideas, but yeah, I think that's a great one, and I was shocked that I read some of the what came out about that. Pretty horrible.
Mm.
Pretty
Oh,
horrible.
terrible.
Yeah, you're not a good
Terrible.
person to go through to give that kind of advice and even push those things.
Yeah, it is the rat race in the end. I mean, that's basically like management consulting's Wall Street, and everybody tries to outdo the other. A lot of the people who are there, kind of feeling that pressure to be successful, to
Mm-hmm.
really drive, and I think it just ends up in a bad spot. I remember when I was just leaving McKinsey, the whole Enron crisis was
Mm-hmm.
unfolding, and of course they were at the center of that. So I know amongst us alums who get together and raise a glass, break bread together, there's wistfulness about what the firm has become. It's not what we joined back in the mid '90s. It doesn't feel like, and sad to see that turn. So yes, biggest business loser of 2024. Okay, on to the next category. This is a fun one. It's a little bit different. We did the winner loser, winner loser. Let's go to the most contrarian belief. So in future, this will be, what do you think is going to happen in 2025 that nobody else believes? But let's now do this. Let's cast backwards and say, okay, if you would have predicted something, give us something that kind of turned out differently than anybody would have expected in 2024.
Yeah, for me, I think this may be like the status quo of what people thought at the time. But is more what I was surprised by that I was wrong on, was the just interest rates. I'm still surprised that they've come down so quickly. I mean, there's so many factors that go into it. I do feel like some of it is political in a sense. But I was pretty surprised from like the economy standpoint that interest rates came down, and also that kind of the economy turned into an overall like net positive throughout the year. So I guess for that one, I'm kind of saying what I was wrong on. that I actually felt quite strongly about during 2024.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like your angle on that. I'm going to do a slightly different angle. So
Where
I've
I
been
was right.
yeah, where I was right. Damn it! See how smart I am. Yeah, I've been a long time cryptocurrency and specifically Bitcoin contrarian. So when we saw the start of the year and Bitcoin was hovering around the kind of for the most part of the year was hovering around the 50-60K, $60,000 per Bitcoin level. It was hard to believe after spending so much time in the doldrums there that we'd see higher heights. But we had this little thing called the halving, where the Bitcoin reward for every block of the Bitcoins of the blockchain solved, that the reward for the miners of Bitcoin went down by half. So there was a further constriction of supply, and we know, all of us who've been paying attention to this for a while know that means it's basic supply and demand. There's going to be an increase in price. Sometimes it just takes a little bit longer to see it. And here we are, kind of end of the year 2024, above 100,000, setting all-time highs just about every day in Bitcoin. I think it's up around 110,000 or so right about now. So I've always been a big contrarian on this, and I would have said it at the beginning of 2024. We're going to see new all-time highs in Bitcoin, and here they are.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm still probably part of like the greater public. So I've known about Bitcoin since I remember listening to it was an NPR episode like back in, I don't know, 2013 or something like that, when
Yeah.
you couldn't buy it. There
Yep.
was no Coinbase, no anything. So I was just listening to it the whole entire time and uh, just trying to understand use case. I'm just a big use case guy with like any of my time. Like, all
Yep.
right, does it make sense? Like, all right, what could I use it for? Okay, nothing. What could I use it for? Okay, nothing. What could I use it for? Okay, nothing. Okay, can you buy stuff with it? No, it's really expensive to transact. Okay, and I'm just always like, oh man. So it's always been, now I understand the idea of store of value, which for me was just a surprising like use case. Because I think I would always hear different things. People would say store of value, but they'd also be like, but you could buy stuff with it. It's like, no. And then you would learn it's expensive and then come back around to just, okay, I don't, I still don't have a use case. But yeah, no, I've forever been wrong on that and probably will continue to be.
I don't know. You could make a contrarian bet for 2025 that Bitcoin's going to go away. It's going to cut its value in half.
I'm
I don't
not
know. We'll
interested
see.
in being harassed online, Alan.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Keep to
It'll get
myself.
our
I'm just
viewership up.
explaining why I haven't invested in it.
That's great.
Yeah, no reason for that. All
That's
right.
great.
What else we got?
All right. On to the next. What else you got? On to the next one. The most anticipated trend of 2024. What do you think you would have said, Tom?
I would have said AI. That one I've been, but actually, I mean, in all honesty, like it didn't feel like it was going to be what it is, but it kind of is the thing to be hyped on. And I continue to. I'm at the beginning of the year though. I would have said like, all right, it's probably like 2-3 years out before it'll do more substantial things, and I'm turning into more a believer of opportunities, which I think is from an opportunity standpoint. That'll be probably our New Year episode where we look at some of this and look on a go forward. I have some predictions there, but I do think going back to looking at 2024, just how OpenAI, Perplexity, all of I mean, even Gemini were ragging on it, but they're trying to improve themselves. Claude for coding. And then the things built on top of these, they're starting to get pretty insane. So
Yep.
that's definitely my trend.
Yep. Okay. I think I would have predicted the continuing trend of the death of the mainstream media. Just watching, these vaunted, maybe they're like the big five, just like we talked about the kind of the death of innovation in industries. Watching the big media enterprises all pretty much kill themselves, from the New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, all the way down to the main network news channels, NBC, ABC, CBS. It just feels like they continued to do everything they could do, especially in an election year, to really hurt their credibility. So I'd like to think that I would have bet on that continuing trend, and I actually kind of like to see it, because that's that right around the corner is some innovation. So
Yeah.
continued doldrums for mainstream media.
Yeah, as we pick the ones that were right.
Yeah,
I mean, it
that's
was
right.
incredible to watch. Just, I think anybody, I don't know, probably under the age of like anybody that has the not even age related, but like that listens to any podcast or anything, or like reads online. I mean, there's just so much more in a way accuracy just because things are so long form,
Yep.
or have the ability to be long form. So yeah, and then you realize you're just getting hyped up. Like I've gotten hyped up off of
Oh yeah,
mainstream media,
for sure.
like for sure. Like
For
I've
sure.
gotten upset, and then you realize that a lot of news, it's psychological. So and if you let somebody talk for a little longer, then okay, that hype gets pushed out of the way. So yeah,
That's right.
I'm right along with you there.
Yep. Great. All right, on to number 7. Now we're going to get into some the next 3 that we round out the list with. They're all media related in the sense that things you can read, things that you can watch, or things that you can listen to. So let's start first with most anticipated blog or book, something you'd read in 2024. Take it away,
Yeah.
Tom.
So this isn't anything I would have expected. But I mean, the first thing is I probably read more just via conversation with ChatGPT than anything, to be honest with you. But the one book I read this year, and it actually in a way kind of led to this podcast, Alan, was The Great
Mm-hmm.
Bridge. So The Great Bridge is the story of the Brooklyn Bridge. I was like thinking of what I wanted to do from a review like to go through and have some version of a podcast. And I went down like the history rabbit hole between like the Golden Gate Bridge, and it was the idea would be like review just different uh, construction projects, big projects over time. And that one kind of sat with me quite a bit. It's about the story of Roebling is this guy that started his
Yep.
like he had built bridges around the country, and he got the okay, like very short summary. He got the okay to build the Brooklyn Bridge, and then like the first week of him building it, there's tragedy, and his son takes over, and then that guy gets sick, and then his wife takes over, all to build the Brooklyn Bridge. So I visited New York since then and looked up, and I'm like, pretty cool. So
Pretty cool. Still there, still
still
going
there,
strong,
and
still an icon.
understanding like the how it gets piled in and built
Yep.
into the river floor is pretty cool. So yeah, the Great Bridge gives a lot of interesting perspectives on what it took to build a construction project, and then also what it still takes.
That's great. I didn't know that backstory behind our podcast.
Yeah, maybe. Oh
And
yeah. I guess we didn't talk about it, but yeah, I had to start with that.
that's good. Yeah, and I might put that on my list for this year. So
The
thank you for
Great
that
Bridge,
recommendation.
or I'll just give a
Yeah, Great
summary of it
Bridge.
one time too.
That's great. The my entry into this category is actually a blog. So I'm glad that you and I mix it up a bit. In one of our previous episodes, we talked about this post called "Cyborgs and Centaurs on the Jagged Frontier," and it's all about how AI can increase productivity in the knowledge-based economy. And they follow a couple hundred consultants who basically either were in the control group that didn't use AI, didn't use OpenAI, ChatGPT to aid their work product, and then a couple of different control groups that did use AI. And the upshot of the story is, yeah, wildly more productive if you use AI. So I think it's for all of us knowledge workers in the world, it's a clarion call to definitely start getting in the game, get into the ring, climb into the ring, start whether it's ChatGPT or Google's Gemini or Claude, find your AI of choice or AIs of choice, and get in the game and start to improve your performance with the use of AI tools. It was a beginning of the year read for me, and it was eye opening throughout the course of the year. So that was definitely my most favorite read of the year.
Yeah, I think next year is going to be all AI stuff on this list.
Yeah, I don't know. Like
I know,
I'm a
I'm joking.
contrarian.
Yeah, oh,
I
we
might
can
go
battle there.
bridge.
Yeah, but yeah, that's a good one. And you had sent that to me, and I read that. I really liked that blog post. That was a great one.
It's a good one. All
How about
right.
you take this one, Alan? You go first here, because I'm curious if we have the same
Okay.
one.
Uh-oh. Okay, sounds good. I'm betting that we don't. Okay,
Okay.
so this is the most anticipated audio or podcast. So this is something you listen to. Mine happened just recently. I had a real strong desire to listen to Mark Andreessen. So it's kind of back to my old venture capital days. I love the venture capitalists, and Mark Andreessen and his business partner Ben Horowitz, they do a podcast together. But this was one where Mark was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and to me, it was like eye opening. Um, I think of Mark as being a pretty straight shooter, and I've listened to a lot of his content, probably over 100 hours of his content in my life. And he's always a straight shooter, super smart. He's a speed talker. He talks fast. I can't keep him on his own podcast. I can't keep him on 2x. I won't be able to understand him. So I have to slow him down to 1.5. Um, uh, when I listened to him on Joe Rogan, it was about a 3-hour podcast, and he really kind of opened my eyes on a couple of big things. The first was the active debanking of a lot of the innovative companies and founders that that his venture capital firm and other VC firms were funding. So debanking, meaning just kind of cutting them out of the banking system because they're in an unfavored or perceived to be unfavored industry. And to hear him go fully public on that, it felt to me like it took a pretty big chunk of courage. He also talked about how the government really was trying to exert control over the field of AI because they wanted to control it for themselves. Now, this could be conspiracy theory. I don't know. But when it comes from the mouth of someone like Mark Andreessen, I tend to take it quite seriously. So if you haven't heard that podcast, the Joe Rogan podcast, I think it's available just about anywhere. Natively, it's available on Spotify. I would strongly recommend you listen to it to just make sure that, again, kind of hearkening back to that, to the trend of the death of the mainstream media. This alternative media of the podcasting form, I think that particular podcast was a really good one for me in 2024.
Yeah. Did we talk about that one, Alan? I also listened to that.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I was recommended to listen to it.
I was
by
still
someone
in a
else.
state of shock after listening to it. I had to go back and listen again. So, and I think I'll listen to it a third time. I mean, it was hard hitting stuff.
Yeah, he's such an interesting person, Mark Andreessen, and like Joe Rogan. What an interviewer! Like, there's multiple.
Yeah.
He went to Spotify. He got a big deal for Spotify. He's still signed to Spotify, but he wasn't allowed to be on YouTube for the first tenure of that agreement. In his renewed contract, he was able to come back to YouTube, so it's easy to watch him.
Thank goodness.
So with that, I mean, he's coming back. Like, I mean, he's just still talking to people he wants to talk to. And it's, yeah, that was a great episode. Actually, I had heard a lot of this stuff, but he went into the detail of certain, just like they're in the mix on government affairs. So yeah, he was basically saying like, I'm going to catch a lot of crap. He's not even allowed to go on Twitter, he was saying, anymore.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So because he always catches so much. So he really went after it. He said on the podcast, he's like, man, I'm really going to hear about this. But yeah, he kind of, certain people are at a certain level of wealth, and he is there and then comfortable enough to speak out, which is pretty cool. Mine is also podcasts. I had two. One was All In, right? Just, I know that's kind of like probably a generic one at this point, but I don't
That's
know if
why you
everyone
thought
listens
we'd
to
have
that.
the same one.
Huh? Yeah, exactly. Because I know
That's
we
why
both
you thought
listen
we'd
to
have
it.
the same one. Yeah.
Yeah. Me and Alan both listen to that every single week. So, and it goes to, so I have a backup too, which I'll share. But yeah, I mean, those guys have really, like, I think, taken it to the next level on themselves. They've interestingly, I mean, they've now like politically associated, which we'll see how that turns out for the show. I think one person on there still tries to keep it in the middle as much as he can. But either way, there's just like points on business. And I think what's been interesting to me, they've been doing it for like the past 4 years. It's been interesting to watch them evolve and like change opinions, change mindset, like challenge themselves on there. And I think that's one of the things that you and I have kind of taken from those guys. That's like, how do we evolve our thinking? How do we, just by being more well-read and being, just take alternative views from each other. I think that's something that I've taken from them. And then also they just come with good good news. I try and stay ahead of them on my own. So they're just my own baseline for things, which is a tough one to shoot for. But yeah, I've learned a lot, and I've been able to stay ahead of a lot of other people, right? On here, where stay ahead of your peers. That's kind of stay ahead of everyone. So, and including execs at, I would say a lot of, if CEOs are listening to podcasts, especially in California, they're listening to All In. You're listening to the same exact thing as your CEO is. So that's one. And then my backup was Acquired FM. So these guys do deep dives into business. They did one recently on IKEA, and I haven't read the book, but there was this procurement related. One of the guys that was over category management and supply chain at IKEA, he wrote a book years ago just about how they came up with the table and how they keep costs low, and then the way they structure things. And they do deep dives into big companies. They've had like Zuckerberg on, and now they have fame associated with them, which I thought was, but they're still just cool guys that work real hard at what they do. So I thought I've learned a lot from them. There's an LVMH episode, which was super cool.
Oh, cool.
Like, Bernard. And so they dive deep on some of those things. So I'd recommend, if people are thinking
on my list.
Yeah. So those two.
That's great. Good ones. All right. Our final category, most anticipated video or movie. And maybe I'll go first again, because I thought I'll just try and mix it up a little bit here. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And, when you live in Pittsburgh, you got to be a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I'm a season ticket holder. I got 3 boys who are rabid Steelers fans. And, I don't like to watch much outside of news and football on TV. But one of my kids called me up and he said, "Hey, Dad, have you seen that show Hard Knocks?" Because they get in behind the door, the locker room door, and do some interviews with not only the head coach, Mike Tomlin, but a bunch of the Steelers themselves. And he said, "Yeah, it's worth watching." And I watched it, and it overachieved. It was fantastic. I can't wait to see future episodes. So if you're a Steelers fan, if you're out there in Steelers Nation, here we go. Please jump in and watch Hard Knocks. You'll love it.
Great. I saw, was it Russell Wilson? They had on the game this last week, Eagles Steelers, they had showed some of that Hard Knocks. I was like, I had no idea they were on Hard Knocks this year. But then I heard it's like a season, like a bigger, it's a bigger thing, right? It's not just one team.
It is.
Historically, they followed one team.
I think they did our whole division. So we get to see little bits of the entire division, which is great. By the way, congratulations on that game, Tom.
Thanks. Yeah, that was good. The I guess the one I had on this, I think there's a final one, was the SpaceX. So returning, they had the chopsticks, right, where the essentially missile-looking thing comes down,
unbelievable,
and then lands with that fireball below it, and then just sort of gets like snagged by chopsticks. So that would have been my my top pick for video this year.
And they nailed it the first time they tried it. It's just like the engineers are top notch at that company. I can't even imagine how flabbergasted they were that they nailed it the first time. It's crazy.
I know, amazing. So also loved it. So so yeah, that would be my top video for this year.
Great. Well, good episode. I'm glad we did a little casting back. Hope everybody enjoyed that. I think, Tom, the plan is our first episode of 2025, we'll be doing the same thing, but this time it'll be an honest to goodness prediction show. So we'll be looking forward. So Tom, get busy, start working,
Sounds thinking. Good. Happy New Year, Alan. I'm wearing the white for the new year. You're wearing your the nice suit. You're going to a more formal party than I am, it looks like. So
trying to get the new year kicked off right.
Sounds good.
Good. Well, on behalf of your humble hosts here at Rebuild Procurement Podcast, we are the Santa of sourcing, Tom Finn, and your Rudolph of rebuilding, Alan Veek, in the final productive week in Procurement 2024, and anticipating a happy procurement podcasting new year in 2025. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us on the Rebuild Procurement Podcast. Like and subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest procurement content.
Show me, and you won't hear the word rebuild.